Hey there, welcome to another episode of Coffee Solo. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this starting at 11:18 p.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, October 18th, 2025. Wait a minute. This is the title of today's episode is episode 2025-10-19-01. It's the number. Well, I'm not even going to publish it until the 19th, so why bother pretending it was really on the 18th and so on. It's basically the 19th, so I'm calling it audible because I might want to do another episode on the 19th later in the day, which means I can get a 02, which is a rarity. But the whole notion behind that numbering scheme was to enable that. So I'm cheating, full disclosure. I am recording this at now 11:19. Did I say that already? I think it was 11:18. Yeah, 11:19 p.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, October 18th. 2025, soon to be October 19th. Today's title and topic, No Kings. Well, there's more topics. I did prepare today's show with an outline because as time was ticking by, I said I want to get a bunch of things in here for this episode, but now I guess I could have waited. Either way, the title, No Kings, a reference to the protest adventures that took place on the 18th around the country, around the United States. Yes, my voice is not ideal. I have been using my nasal fresh sporadically, in case you're curious. The air has just been off. The weather has been a little odd with rain. So I'll apologize now for sounding like my voice is strained or fatigued. It's actually not bad, but it does sound, yeah. Anyway, so we'll get that out of the way. The summary of today's episode. Biggest protest in U.S. history, but will it make a difference? The links for today's episode, the streamlined links, the Coffee Solo homepage, presently at danhugo.com. There will be almost certainly a danhugo.com/coffee solo section. But right now, as long as you know where danhugo.com is, you'll be able to find effectively the homepage. Coffee Solo and Buy Me an Update are sort of personal projects. So I did create a website for each one. This adds some flexibility to my creativity. There is a profile page linking everything still at buymeacoffee.com/danhugo. That's been there for years. I keep saying 5 years. It might be 5 years. Something like that. You can always find links to all of my audio programs. You are under no obligation to spend any money, but if you do want to, that is one place to do it. The place that I am not linking to, I guess I could. These episodes of Coffee Solo are actually published first on Ko-fi.com. Let me add that right now. So these are first available. Ko-fi.com/danhugo/posts, which is how this production got its name. I used to publish exclusively on Coffee Solo. Ko-fi.com/danhugo. Ko-fi.com/danhugo/posts. Nobody really visits that, so I don't really stress about it too much. But that is where the name came from. And so the first link, so now I have two different links that I publish. One gets published everywhere and one gets published on coffee.com/danhugo/posts. So I post the audio there first, and then I post it to the Spotify for creators, and then it gets fanned out to everything. So if you visit the profile page linking everything, you will find links to the various productions that I create each week, including Coffee Solo, and the different ways to find it. Both Coffee Solo and Buy Me an Update, while they are published on the Coffee websites, have a Spotify for Creators profile. So that's in the links right now. That's going to go away because you can find that from the Buy Me a Coffee profile page linking everything. So no need to clutter your mind with more and more links that you can always find if you really want to locate my audio programming. And hopefully you do. The extra link for today's episode, the Schoolhouse Rock, No More Kings episode. If you don't know what Schoolhouse Rock is, you're missing out. No More Kings seemed appropriate, and it's unofficial. There is no, as far as I can tell, there's no official Schoolhouse Rock posting of their content to YouTube. So this may or may not still be there forevermore. I think it's been there for a while. So YouTube link for that. seemed apropos. I did create an outline for today's episode. I'm going to guess it's 11:24. I'm going to guess I'm going to run over anyway. So it's appropriate to say it's the 19th when we publish this. So, yeah. I don't need to do that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to, those Spotify links will go away. They're just found on both danhugo.com and on the buymeacoffee.com/danhugo. So no need to replicate those overdoing it on the shameless self-promotion perhaps. The outline for today's episode. See, I wrote a lot of this out, so I kind of feel like this is not at all a spontaneous episode. I am drinking coffee. I just got some Nigerian? Sorry, totally wrong. I just brought the coffee up, so I'm like, interrupting myself. Nicaraguan beans today from Atlas Coffee. I like Atlas Coffee. I get a bag of some regional coffee every, I want to say it's about every 2 months at this point. Pretty good. So for the record, I did not attend the No Kings demonstrations, partially because my left knee is still problematic. That's not a great excuse, but the other part of that is partially because the Las Vegas protest scene is actually super disappointing. I read earlier today, so of course this could be different depending on, if there were updates. Probably would check tomorrow, Sunday, or maybe even Monday to see what the actual number estimates were. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police had some headaches about the protests back in April. No Kings Part 1 or whatever it was called. They arrested a bunch of people, but then they had to let them go because of process or something. So they were shaking their finger at people. You better be watching out. We will be. Mostly though, because I think actual non-performative protesting has more impact for longer periods of time. Though big numbers, big giant crowds do make for impressive video and still image reporting. We need all of it. We saw the bigger cities had better turnout, better, just visually appealing imagery of giant crowds. A crowd of 2,000 people anywhere in Las Vegas is kind of disappointing when you think about it. I mean, they should have a protest on July 4th. That would be ridiculous. I think they said, there's, our weekly visitor numbers are pretty good, but people come here specifically for July 4th. It's big, giant crowds, right? So in Vegas, a crowd of 2,000 people is something of also ran. But I personally, again, I did a whole episode of one program somewhere. I think it was FFS Talk. If you're going to have demonstration protests, like people out on the street with signs and whatnot, those are effective. They strike a chord visually. They are an indication of commitment to the cause, right? They're performative. You're putting on a performance for the camera, for the crowds, to make an impression. Now, back in when Nixon was in office, there were protesters outside the White House. I believe I've seen video. I wasn't around back then. People climbing on the White House fence or standing, not overthrowing not invading the White House, but just being menacing in their activities. And I think for the sake of the TV cameras and reporting, they kind of let people go right to that edge. I think Nixon was a little frustrated by the reaction of the population regarding the Vietnam War participation and so on. So, boy, would they have more to talk about with Nixon. But the bottom line was, back then, there was no internet. There was no digital demonstration and so on. So I think my comments were basically, if I can summarize myself from my memory, I think the value of coordinated boycotts, like don't spend money. There was an effort to not spend money today on the 18th to coincide with the No Kings. I think that's much more effective as long as businesses and in general, there's a realization like, don't forget everybody, all commerce in the not most of it is based on people spending money. People, companies spend money on other companies and whatnot, but why are they spending money? Because people are buying things from them. So people are an integral component of the economy. So if people, if you can get 100 million people to just not spend money for a day, 2 days, people, that gets noticed. And if you can say, guess what? That's not a fluke. Your accounting system wasn't down for a day. We decided to remind you that we are here. So yeah, I think, and I didn't buy anything on the 18th, so I did that part of it anyway. Yeah, I wish Vegas had a better everything, but they need to do better if they want to participate in this. And we have our governor is one of the demonstrators are just paid Democrats, and that's silliness. So I think there are a myriad of ways, but kudos to those who did show up. And so the Schoolhouse Rock video, a reminder that this has been going on for a while. It's why the country started, and hopefully, and I guess if you want to say that it's anti-American to do demonstrations, you just consider who is saying that, and we're making America great again, and just think maybe we're anti the America you think you're in, because yeah, nonviolent demonstrations that's one of the ingredients. It's right there in the First Amendment. There has been a carnival, literal carnival, across the street from my home, also known as my production studio, where I am standing right now in front of a microphone. And during the day, I don't even know what time they start, but luckily it's not like 8 in the morning. And you know what? To be honest, that wouldn't even be that bad. I would not be, because it's it's not upstairs. It's 200 yards away, 300 yards away. And but they do start sometime during the day, and it runs until about 11 p.m. on the weekends. During the week, I don't think it's all full hours like that. I think it cuts off earlier. But you got the classic carnival barker and the screaming crowds on the rides and everything. It's all day. So luckily, like I said, it appears to shut down at 11 p.m. That's one of the reasons I was kind of putting this off. And it's not loud enough to probably be picked up by the microphone, but it is loud enough to be something of a distraction through the day. And, screaming and mechanical noise, but it's just far enough away so that it's like I can sleep through it. I took a nap, all good, but it's just enough of a distraction. It's like having a conversation going on, and you're trying to have a phone call or a Zoom call. You're like, hey guys, come on. Hey Carnival, come on. But it's been sort of, it was unexpected. The Carnival just appeared there. I'm like, are we in an episode of HBO's, anyway, Carnival, out of nowhere. I actually, speaking of that, not really. I actually did watch the mayoral debates for New York City. They were interesting. I think, even though it was a three-way, I don't even remember the third guy, but Mamdani versus Cuomo is the thing. What's his name? Slivak? Now I want to look it up. Mayoral debate. See, a spontaneous program. They don't even have the guy's name. They have all three of them, and they only caption it with two. What is this? Curtis Sliwa, Sliwa. So yeah, Curtis was okay. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he may have mentioned once, maybe twice, that he was the founder of the Guardian Angels or something. So good for him. But it was really Mamdani versus Cuomo. They're the two leading in the polls, coming up ahead of the real polls. So interesting to watch. So obviously the big thing they're attacking is his inexperience, Mamdani, and the fact that he's a democratic socialist, declared. What does it mean to be a democratic socialist in America? That's a tough one. There is the DSA. If you ever hear DSA, that's the Democratic Socialists of America. They have a website. He's got one term in the state assembly. That may not be enough. It kind of gives you some idea of where you could begin, I think, but it doesn't give you the experience of Governor Cuomo when it comes to handling corruption and whatnot on the corrupt side. So I'm not a fan of Cuomo. I'm not a fan of his brother either. I think Mario, his father, was probably a little bit better, but I don't really know. That was before my time. But yeah, the Cuomos, the brothers Cuomo, not a fan. But so there have been socialist candidates and even candidates who have won smaller elections, if I'm remembering correctly, and I didn't do any research on this, but I just seem to recall at some point coming across, well, here's some other socialist candidates. Sometimes they're just socialists. Bernie Sanders, famously a social democrat, although I don't know if he has actually called himself a democratic socialist. AOC, I believe, has referred to herself as a democratic socialist, but I think probably behaves as a social democrat for the time being, maybe. Bernie caucuses with the Democrats, but he claims to be an independent with I think social democrat is easier to deal with because a democratic socialist sounds like a Dodge of some sort. Obviously, FDR, his policies were certainly social democrat. Anybody who complain, socialism, hopefully they're sending back their social security checks and Medicare and so on. So social safety net and all that. I think the motivation for having a stable and growing society should coincide with some of the principles of a social democracy, like making sure your society is healthy, that people continue to survive and thrive. Even the rugged individualism of the billionaire class, I think, is now that I'm in the club, I can tell everybody to screw off. I think that's inappropriate, but what do I know? I kind of think, a high-profile city like New York, or is there a high-profile city like New York? Maybe, but in the U.S., New York is pretty unique. It's hard to find a place that is exactly like. There'll be places that are sort of like being the next Silicon Valley. You can say that, but New York has real problems. It has a large population, a large diverse population, financially, right, from an economic standpoint. So it'd be an interesting test of democratic socialism in their agenda, I think, partially because a test at the scale of a city as large, complicated, and maybe even as complex and consequential as New York is kind of a next logical step from the various UBI or universal basic income experiments that have taken place on smaller scale within the United States and also at a larger scale around the world in different places. So the concept of a UBI, universal basic income, is not new, and it would certainly fall into somewhere into the social democrat or democratic socialist, or even just some flavor of socialist agenda. So I think testing these notions for demonstration purposes on a city like New York, highly consequential, highly indicative, pass or fail, right? Now, it could be a bite too big to chew. There may be too many forces against, and it may, a foregone conclusion. See, we told you it was going to fail because we made it fail. So it'll be interesting to see. But with the population at large, if Mamdani does win the election, maybe he will have an actual mandate, not a pretend one with a plurality of votes. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe he will have a plurality, since there will be, even Eric Adams is still on the ballot because of the late exit from the race. So there will be some check marks for a candidate no longer in the race, which can reduce, it spreads the votes out. So, although they do rank choice voting, I think, in New York. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think people who are listening to the Red Scare rhetoric are falling in for the old tricks, falling out for one of those. New York is not going to be taking over the world. It's not going to take over the country by electing a young DSA mayor, Democratic Socialists of America, but it might shine some light on some ideas, and it might say, oh, this didn't work. One of the ideas that's really getting sort of, not really slammed, but it's definitely being pointed to and some light shown on the free transit notion. I follow a few transit-oriented people for public transit and whatnot, mass transit. Free makes it a very expensive proposition to support a functioning transit system. So the government has to fund it, and then any of that doesn't track, then your transit system will start to fail. There is a notion that making the trains run on time is one of those components of a well-run society. So you'll see both socialist governments at scale, the Soviet Union and Germany, for example, a fascist government, a fascist authoritarian government from the 30s. Anybody remember that one? Having the trains run on time was essential, and there'd be hell to pay if they weren't. So it's an indication of a well-run society, that your government is running things for you, so you better listen, and so on. But is it practical in New York? Probably not. I tend to lean towards some of the arguments against that working. However, I think subsidized. So I'll interject with one thing. And this is not like this could happen. This does happen in my experience. when you offer free bus, so for example, in Sunnyvale, California, where I used to live, the cold weather shelter was operated in the winter. It was a National Guard armory, so they had a big giant open space like a gymnasium, and they had cots set up, and you could check in. They had 150 people or so. There'd be some dinner and so on, and then at 6 in the morning or something, before 8 a.m., you had to be out. You had to be on your way. Maybe we'll see you tonight, but you got to go somewhere else now. So they would people were offered, I don't know if it was automatic or if you had to ask for it, but people would receive an all-day bus pass. And there was a bus, and I cannot remember the number. It would run on El Camino from San Jose to Palo Alto, I think. So you could just hang out on the bus all day. The heat would be on, so you could be sitting in a chair, moving. Somebody tells you to get off. Okay, get off, hang out, get back on the bus. So that does happen. Here in Vegas, I see people, taking a bus pass that was discarded that still has some time on it. So they'll get on the bus and so on. I don't have a problem with humans trying to stay warm and so on. I think when you leave those people to chance, they're going to try to take what's available. So, I think like a well-rounded approach to making sure people are okay was probably be a good idea. But as far as free transit, that's one of the arguments is that, the homeless people will take over the buses. It doesn't really happen at scale, but it becomes something. It's a survival act. So someone at some point should say, wait a minute, maybe we should also try to make people survivable, make our environment survivable for people who, anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. So the bottom line is I would be in favor of subsidies, like student pricing and all that, which they kind of have here in Vegas, and I've seen it in other places. Bus passes, buy a month in advance. What I don't like is that they expire here in Vegas, which is ridiculous. You buy a bus pass, if you don't use it in 2 months, I think it is, they just keep the money. What planet is this? So I think some of these things could be tuned up, and I don't know what they're going to do in New York, but I mean, being able to get around a city is part of the way you enable people to work, get to school, go to the hospital if they need to, shopping and so on, without requiring owning of a car, right? So you increase the mobility of your society, and that generally helps with your economy and just quality of life. So I'm all for making transit easier and affordable. It doesn't mean giving it away for free to people who don't. Here in Vegas, $5 for a 24-hour bus pass. Okay, that's fine. If I had difficulty with that, but I needed to get to work by taking the bus, if I could get that at a reduced rate, why not? If I can get it for free, well, great. But then if I'm starting to make serious dollars and I have no problem paying $5 a day or $20 for 2 weeks, or I can't remember, the monthly is probably $30 or something, 35. So they're giving you little price breaks for paying ahead, and then they keep your money if you don't use it. But the point is, I think subsidies make a ton more sense than completely free. So, and first of all, you don't always appreciate something if you're not paying for it. So I think if there is a free tier and a paid tier that's based on like an application process or a need or something, I'm not trying to be stingy, but I think at some point you say, hey, this bus runs on people using it. Maybe tax gasoline or something and have a transit tax attached to purchasing of public transit fuel, right? So diesel fuel for transit companies wouldn't have the tax or something. And obviously, trucking and cars run on petroleum probably. Electric cars don't. So that tax would be probably on the way out. Anyway, I'm just throwing some ideas around here. But the bottom line is I think it will be interesting to see New York test this if Mamdani does win. Test this idea out on the population is something like 10 million people. And they get a lot of attention with the financial districts and all that. Some companies are going to move out, but that's okay. That's the way it is. I think his tax programs will be interesting because you can't really, New York City cannot tax people like the state would. Then there's no guarantee that the state funds would flow to the city if there was an increase. So it's going to be an interesting thing. It is a better test of what works and what does not than bringing an authoritarian dictator into the office of the president and all that silliness. So I personally think, even though Mamdani's ideas are not 100%, they're also not 0% as far as thought out, viable, maybe worth taking a look at. So people that are dismissing it out of hand, oh, communism, actually not really. Oh, socialism like the 60s, not really. So I think a deeper dive and better understanding would be essential, not political rhetoric and campaign rhetoric and rhetoric and so on. A lot of attention is being paid again to the defund the police stuff, which is also a factor in the New York City campaigns. So in New York and around the U.S. with city invasions and whatnot too, like, you know, the federal government removes budgeted subsidies for cities, so their police don't get those subsidies, or whatever the funds for, and so on. And then you can make an argument that, oh, see, you're not doing enough, and send in the National Guard or ICE agents or all this other chaos. That's historically not good. This will not be a period of history that people look back on and think, oh, that was a good idea. But the defund the police thing is, of course, like death panels, and there've been a few where the right will they'll label things, and unfortunately the left has no idea what to do with that. So defund the police. So I have a take, of course. While I will talk about it, in the next episode 100 of FFS Talk, I'm going to plant that seed right here. Here's a hint. The main idea between defund the police is actually to split some of the responsibilities given to police officers in the police department, which is funded as an opaque entity, right? Here's police money. Do your thing. Break some of that funding off so it goes to those professionally trained to handle specific situations. Mental health experts, for example, maybe a hostage negotiator or two, which sometimes they'll just say, oh, it's a police officer. But, the FBI has hostage negotiators. If you have someone with a background in psychology and negotiation with people with mental illness and so on, maybe that person is not a police officer. Maybe that person is a mental health professional that happens to work with the police. And so you make that an integral part of the program. Mostly people who would be on hand to take on nonviolent or not yet violent scenarios, though I think substantially better training of police officers is also essential. So technically defunding the police should really be something like, auditing, reapportioning, getting more value and more training for the dollar, not spending it all on military hardware, which I guess people love to do. Handling of hearing impaired people is one scenario that comes to mind. As an example, if someone doesn't hear commands like get on the ground, they may not make it out alive. And we've seen that. I don't have a case to point to, but you see it in the news every once in a while that a hearing impaired person was shot and sometimes killed because they probably didn't hear what you were saying. They're probably saying, what? I can't hear you. I'm not kidding. I mean, you may smirk, but it's a real thing. If the assumption is always, I must draw my firearm on someone if they are not following my commands, that's an unnecessary violence that might ensue, which is unfortunate. If we are a society of people who cares about the health and well-being of people, even those in trouble, the first thought may not be start shooting, hopefully. Where would I start? When there is a fire, we do not call the police to handle that. You know why? They'll be on the scene eventually, but they might even get to the fire first. But we have people actually trained and equipped to deal with fire. And they exist for these situations exactly. So why would we say, okay, everything else goes to the police? I haven't heard anyone make the fire versus police argument. They could. I used to live in Sunnyvale, California, which I've mentioned. Sunnyvale is the only city of note. Like there's one other place allegedly, but I think the last time I looked, I think they don't do this anymore because there just wasn't enough population or something. But Sunnyvale, California, in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, has the only viable integrated Department of Public Safety so that every individual in the DPS is triple trained. They're a police officer, they're a firefighter, and an EMT, emergency medical technician. So any person, and when I was living there, the population was around 120,000. They had something like 220 DPS officers across the 3 verticals. So I think the population is more like 140 or 150 now, 1,000. So I'm going to hope that they have something like 250 maybe officers of whatever training and so on. So they can move between professions. So your police officer actually, if police is on the first on scene, police officers carry with them in their cruiser enough equipment so that they can enter a burning building if they have to. Not one that's engulfed, but they can don some fire protective equipment and enter, probably try to save a life or two. So get people out when they first get there when the fire is smaller. Firefighters will arrive with the particular equipment, the trucks, the ladders, the engines. Probably a paramedic unit will show up. Those are EMTs. They're cross-trained. So when I was in the Leadership Sunnyvale program, we got to work with the DPS people for a day, and then I did some other interactions with them. In general, as a SNAP volunteer, Sunnyvale Neighbors Actively Prepared, so think CERT, but at the city, not FEMA level. So one day during one of these, I said, hey, so any police officer could be a firefighter and an EMT and everything. You can switch around. Now, traditionally, one person would remain in a role for, some period of time. They're not switching every week, but someone might say, you know what, I'd like to try my hand at being a firefighter for a while. So you could rotate through the 3, pick up extra training and so on. So I said, so if the police have fire equipment in the cruiser, does that mean the firefighters actually carry a firearm and could pull people over, which they could actually. So if you cut off a fire truck in Sunnyvale, right, you prevent them from getting somewhere. They're not going to if they're en route to an emergency, but they could pull you over and they could write you a ticket. They could cite you because they are police officers also. And then they wouldn't tell me but I believe what I determined eventually was that they put the firearm in a lockbox in the truck, in the vehicle. So they enter, because you don't want to carry a firearm into a fire, probably. But they are police officers. And so for example, if you're an EMT, if you're driving around in a vehicle with the right equipment, you're trained on that equipment. So I can't remember if it's level B or class B or something. So there's emergency life-saving levels. So you either have A or B or something like that. So there's a basic level, which is probably called A, but why not B? Whatever it is, it escapes me at the moment. You are trained to stop bleeding. You are trained to use a first aid kit for real. So gauze pads, scissors, checking for breaks, doing a basic field triage on someone to see what their injuries are so you can give that information to the EMTs when they arrive in a structured way, right? So you understand the basic life-saving services. So you pull someone out of a fire, you begin examining them for injury, for smoke inhalation injuries and so on. Somebody who may have a broken neck or something, you know how to manage that and so on, but you don't have all the equipment. So emergency life-saving services, I think, maybe that's B or something, I don't know. They are trained in things like CPR paddle. I'm sorry, not CPR. CPR is fine. The resuscitation paddles not resuscitation, what is it called? They're the cardiac paddles, right? So they're going to charge up your heart and try to get your defibrillator. Something like that. That's right? So having that equipment, you want to be able to take measurements. So EKG, you want to be able to possibly administer medications. You might need to administer some adrenaline or who knows what. I don't know. So you're going to get that extra training if you are an EMT, but every single member of DPS is able to manage a basic life-saving scenario, right? Stopping the bleeding. A fun fact about CPR, you're not supposed to start CPR if you cannot stop it while you have to hand a patient off to a medical professional. So I think if you're one DPS officer on scene and you encounter someone that requires CPR, but there's also like somebody running around with a gun or something, once you start CPR, you cannot stop. So I think you have to let that person go, right? Kind of a bummer. They train you with that information in CERT and SNAP. Because if you're a civilian first responder and you come upon someone who requires CPR, but you're 3 days from getting any sort of first response, like real professional medical and fire and police and all that. You're not going to conduct CPR for 3 days. You're also not going to be able to do anything if you conduct CPR and the person isn't going to make it for 3 days. But you are on the ground there to try to help as many people as possible. So that's one of those sad truths that they don't really make a big thing of it, but they don't allow CERT volunteers to start CPR. So there you go. So yeah, we get the fire versus police, but we don't get the police versus mental professional. Don't quite get that. I saw earlier today, so on the 18th, that the Vegas Chamber, so the City of Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, it's its own entity, but it operates in the City of Las Vegas. I have to think that they're actually not limited to the City of Las Vegas, so it's just called the Vegas Chamber, is partnering with Tech Alley to help to develop the innovation ecosystem of Las Vegas. I just can't imagine a worse choice. This is another head shaker, in my opinion. Like, I'm shaking my head right now. Where people up near the top, or people in positions where they need to or want to make a decision, they're making dumb decisions in pursuit of impossible goals. So Las Vegas as the next Silicon Valley, that we are a global innovation hub, soon to be Hollywood 2.0, and so on. As I mentioned in the most recent episode of Cafe Genius Impresarios, even Marky Mark, or Mark Wahlberg, if you're doing business, his family looks to be moving to Florida. He just bought a home that's twice as expensive as the one he had here in Summerlin. No word on if he's making a full-time move or if he's splitting residences or something. But he was all excited about being in Vegas when he moved here in 2022 and was an advocate and a lobbyist, even maybe informally, for the Hollywood 2.0 notion, to try to get some tax incentives and subsidies and all that for studios to move production and offices and so on to the Vegas area, studios to actually produce projects here and so on. So 2 legislative sessions have now passed without any sort of Hollywood 2.0 oriented legislation being passed for signature and all that. Governor Lombardo has allegedly called a special session of the legislature wherein they may consider one or both of the bills that didn't make it this most recent session. I've talked about that quite a bit. But the take home, he's gone. He's out. So there seems to be this notion, and I've talked about this quite a bit. Oh, some famous person or a rich person or something, we'll just talk to them. And I really think, so I did my time on the ground in Silicon Valley. Like, I had startups, I worked for startups, I worked at big companies. So I was in the real Silicon Valley, not the fake one that we are trying to be, for a while. I was there for many years. And seeing what is missing in the innovation culture here in Vegas, I have certainly talked about strategies focusing on cultivating that culture and supporting the emergence of a more vital ecosystem. I am of the belief that you cannot really build an ecosystem, not one that will last. Like, you can't just go snap your fingers and say, okay, we're the next Silicon Valley. It would be ongoing development. Listening to the Tech Alley crowd about this, like partnering with them, seems like a miss to me. I just wanted to vent about that a little bit. It kind of irked me to see that. I've essentially kind of thrown my hands up at the whole notion of put the big air quotes up, startup scene in Vegas. I think the people that subscribe to the Tech Alley, oh, we gotta all move to that meetup. We gotta all move at this. Oh, and they have free lunch and free food. And yeah, so we've been talking, there's a lot of talk going on for years, but what's coming of it? I don't know. I think the people doing interesting things are not going to Tech Alley. I did not yet submit a project act to Hacktoberfest. I think I talked about this 2 episodes ago or so, maybe more, 3. Project Act, the Autonomous Cohort Tessellation. By submit, I mean I did not publish anything with a Hacktoberfest tag on it on GitHub, and I have not announced it on the projects channel on the Hacktoberfest Discord server. I still want to, but I have not yet. I haven't placed so much of a priority on getting all of the stuff I want or need to get sorted. I haven't gotten that stuff sorted to make this viable, to enable people to participate. I have rationalized this by thinking part of the pitch for Project Act is a better methodology for finding and connecting people and projects, like the Hacktoberfest scenario, without being tied to GitHub, GitLab, etc. And so now it'll be 20 days, tomorrow, Monday. After 20 days of the 31 days of Hacktoberfest, there will be people who have either tried to and failed, tried to and succeeded, or given up on trying before they tried to find things to contribute to. Because the scheme that they have now is pretty much like, here's a fire hose and here's everything and good luck. So Project Act is supposed to be a more useful way of accomplishing that. It happens to be focused initially on civic volunteer organizations like Innovate for Vegas Foundation, but it could also be a Hacktoberfest, disjoint cohorts all over the place who want to find each other and collaborate. Could be other organizations. So it's not only for civic volunteerism, could be for anything. So discovery, tools to enable and encourage connection, communication, and collaboration. That's the tagline. And it's all using pretty basic stuff. It's really about usability. That's the stuff that we need contributions for. So, yeah, I got to catch up on that. In the meantime, I've been fiddling with Tailwind. If you're not familiar, don't worry about it. But it's a utility class based CSS framework, I guess you could say, for web pages and so on. And I'm trying to build a static page automation tool that doesn't, well, I call it content transformation. So the tool takes your inputs and does whatever you need to do with them and then generates some output. Doesn't need to be like Pandoc is great for converting a markdown document to an XML document or an HTML document. But I would like to convert one YAML document to another YAML document. I would like to merge YAML documents into a single YAML document. I'd like to take a YAML input and load it into a template so that the template gets filled in by some of the values in the YAML document and it spits out HTML, static site generator. But I would like the templates that are used to be optionally the same ones I would use in a dynamic program data-driven website. So there's a couple of things that make it a little bit different from stuff that's out there. There's like dozens, maybe over 100. I think over 100. I think it's maybe almost 200 static site generators in all languages, all flavors. But I would suggest that this is another way to, or another reason. This is another reason to build from scratch. The fact that there are so many, as a learning experience, an example for those wishing to join the foundation cohort, Innovate for Vegas Foundation, or anywhere. So building a tool is useful. Building a tool that does similar things, but with a new approach or a new set of requirements, has some utility. So it's similar to our time at Harvey Mudd College for my classmates and I. When there was a class called E54, now I think it's E82, and they changed it a little bit. But E54, we had to make, among other things, a screwdriver and a hammer from raw materials. So, plastics, steel, end mill, metal lathe, plastics. So you could make, you would lathe this, was it lucite? Clear lucite? Is that right? Handle. So you would flute it and you would, what else? Well, the flute was in the end mill. You would put a little conic relief towards the blade side, drill the hole for the blade. That was the end mill also. So basically you're using plastics and metals in these shop machines. You're heat treating the steel of the blade and the hard face of the hammer. You're making interference fit parts. You're making a wooden handle on a wood lathe. So there's this whole process and you're like, well, couldn't I just go buy a hammer and a screwdriver? But having made them, you now know what goes into making this. It's a great hands-on examples to learn how to. And so by having a fully deployed, like functional tool that someone could look at and add to as a kind of an entry point into other open source projects and so on, to become a part of the cohort that we have, right? So somebody that joins and says, I've never done this before. Well, we're not a programming school, so you can start on something like this and see if you can fiddle with it and learn by doing. But yeah, so now we have some effort that goes into making something that we see around us every day. So you have some like hammers and screwdrivers. Now that I've made one, I have a certain appreciation for what goes into that. So it's one way to learn. So that's the idea. So I really need to get some of that going. I will say Saturday the 18th all day, I was maybe it was some sort of like sympathetic energy lull or something. I just felt dead. I have to imagine if I had attempted to attend and participate in the No King stuff, there would have been 2001 people, and I would have been the one at the tail end, dozing off perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have for you at the moment. I really got to get Hugo Foss going, but I really got to get In Las Vegas going. So there's all this stuff, and total solo can be very tiring, very frustrating. So we'll see what we can do. Anyway, I got 12:07 in the morning, so it is the 19th. When I post-produce this episode, the silence will be truncated somewhat. So the episode timer is saying 49 minutes, 10 seconds. I'm going to say 45 minutes. You can hear my voice is already fighting me. We should have ended 20 minutes ago. But maybe you're saying that as well. But here we are at the end of another episode of Coffee Solo. Thank you for listening as always. No Kings, don't forget. Let's try to keep this place running. Unless you're a fan of the new thing. I don't know what to say to that. All right, take it easy.